Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Anonymous Hedgehog podcast. My name is Maya,
And I'm Rich.
and we'll be your hosts. So today's topic is relationships. So I was actually thinking about this last night. Okay, so let me just ask you, do you believe in soulmates?
That's like an interesting question because I've never thought like that long term in general. I feel like with everything you think long term when you get into something, but I've never thought of it as like soulmates per se. I don't know if I believe in that.
I feel like I've had an interesting because I feel like when you talk about soulmates, it's kind of like a binary. Like either people believe they exist or people don't believe they exist. But I kind of I feel like I believe that there are soulmates out there, but I don't necessarily think that that is the person that is necessarily you're supposed to be with, if that makes sense. I feel like even if I did meet my soulmate, there's not a guarantee that I would choose them. If I feel like that's weird to say. I feel like your
Yeah.
soulmate is not necessarily your best choice for a life partner, but I do believe that they do exist.
That's even more interesting because I've never heard of someone say soulmates exist, but you don't have to choose them.
Yeah.
Because usually the consensus is that if there's a soulmate, then it's written in your fate. Like this goes back to what we talked about with fate. The concept of a soulmate is that there is a person in your destiny that you are bound to meet. But you saying that you don't they're written in your destiny, but you don't have to be with them. That's an interesting spin-off.
Yeah, I feel like I kind of believe in the idea that two people they're kind of meant to be, and I don't know, those coincidental situations. I do feel like that stuff exists, but I don't know. I feel like at least personally, that's not what I like. I would, even if I did meet my soulmate, I don't think that I would I wouldn't necessarily think that they're the best person for me.
What? But that's the whole concept. The whole concept is that they're the best person for you.
I guess that's the idea of soulmates. But when I think of soulmates, I think of two people that kind of because I think of the kind of television portrayal of soulmates. If you think of, have you ever watched Friends?
No, I haven't.
Okay, well, Ross and Rachel are kind of the
Oh,
soulmate
yeah.
type of
Yeah, I
thing,
know about
right?
them, yeah.
And they were kind of on and off for the whole time. And to me, it's just I wouldn't have wanted something like that. Even if I knew that I was destined to be with that person, I would have just not if it was that hard to be in a relationship with them, I wouldn't have taken it over. I would have taken an easier relationship, in my opinion.
I see. So you think you can have an easy relationship with someone that's not your soulmate. And if that was
Exactly, yeah.
possible, you'd choose
'Cause
that.
I feel like I've never been a believer in the kind of person I mean, obviously you have to work at your relationship, but if the relationship is hard, I feel like that's not something that I personally would want to do.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think everyone can agree with that. If the relationship's hard, no one wants to be in it. But I think this is so interesting because my concept of soulmate is so different from yours. Because mine is that it's just the ideal, most perfect person where there would be the least conflict that you would just love off the bat.
Really, that's not what I think of at all when I think of soulmates. When I think of soulmate, I think of I don't know, I think of just kind of lust, not really that much love there. Kind of just you're just initially very attracted, very drawn to that person, but you don't necessarily have a ton of things in common, if that makes sense. You don't necessarily share the same values, but you're just really drawn to each other for no particular reason. That's what I think of when I think of soulmates.
That's so funny. I think your concept of soulmates is my concept of love at first sight, which to me, I think that's the same thing. Where I don't really believe it's a thing, but it's just an initial attraction. But to me, soulmates is more of a personality thing. Your personalities were crafted to be together. When you asked me initially what I think about them, I guess my answer would be that there are people who will inherently click with you. I know there are definitely people with personalities that I just match with instantly, and then there's people who I struggle to even make conversation for minutes with. And that I guess I could consider that part a little bit of a soulmate, but then at the same time I think there's an abundance of soulmates. I think each person can have an abundance of people who are written in their destiny as potentials, personality-wise,
So
not
that
even
doesn't
looks-wise.
So that doesn't even have to do with like relationships. That could just be like friendships or kind of, just like people who you enjoy hanging out with. Like it doesn't have to be like a romantic thing, right? Like you can just click with someone in a kind of like a friendship way. Like I feel like I do that with a lot of people, like not in a romantic sense, but like your personalities just like match on like a, on a friendship level.
That's interesting. Yeah, because it's like, is that destiny? Because if you think that the romantic one is destiny, then why can't the friendship one be destiny too? In fact, the friendship one should be even more destiny because you have more friends than you have like romantic partners. So those people should be written in your destiny clearly because those are people that you engage with from the moment you were born.
I think the concept that you bring up of multiple soulmates is kind of interesting because I feel like when people think of soulmates, they think of one person, right? It's like that one person that you are like destined to end up with. Like,
This
right?
is very unfaithful of me, I guess.
No, but it's just like, I feel like your concept of soulmate is just like when I think of soulmate, I don't think of like the ideal person. Like when I think of soulmates, it's kind of just like the on and off kind of romance kind of thing where like you always, I don't know, those rom-coms like, oh yeah, you always bump into each other and like somehow like you always make it back to each other. Like no matter like what kind of adversity you face in your life, somehow you just always like will end up like together. And like that's what I think of when I think of soulmates. That's interesting that you think of it as kind of just an ideal partner.
Yeah,
Because
well,
I
I
feel
think
like
of it as
an ideal
multiple
partner
ideal
obviously
partners.
kind of exists.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think the difference between this and just the broad definition of an ideal partner is the component of fate, of like
Yeah.
you have been predestined to meet or to be compatible with one of these people. Like you may not even be destined to meet the person. Like your soulmate, you might not ever meet them in your life. But like they are still your soulmate because they are a potential person that you would have clicked with had you met them.
So, so my question would be for that is just like, what if you're in a relationship and you believe in soulmates, but you don't believe that that person is your soulmate? Because for someone that like, if you do believe in soulmates, like you guys, I guess you believe in like one soulmate, like the assumption is that like until you meet that person, every person before that is not your soulmate. So like, should you still stay in that relationship if you think that they're not like your soulmate, like you're not predestined to be with them?
Yeah, I actually have a lot of thoughts on this because like in fact short-term relationships, people are like, oh, like you're just dating for heartbreak because you know
Yeah.
you're going to break up with them eventually. Like especially high school college relationships, unless it's like late college or like graduate school or something, like chances are you're going to break up with them. And so it's like, why are you getting into this relationship if you know they're not going to be like the one that you marry? And I think they're still extremely worth it because for me at least, like the most character development I've ever faced was through a relationship because it really forces you to like learn about how other people view life from the most close perspective you can. Like you are the closest you have ever been to a person when you are in a relationship, and so you really get to see someone else's outlook. And then also like it's just, I guess like short-term relationships just tend to still have like a lighthearted part of them that can still be enjoyed by both people. So like it doesn't have to be like, oh, like we're gonna get kids at this age and we're gonna get like a house at this age. Like you don't need to plan that far ahead because as long as you're having fun in the moment, I think that still makes things worth it.
Yeah, I think that I feel like I agree with you on that. I think the most like the personal development I've experienced, like a lot of it has been through relationships, but I also think it depends on like what stage in life you are. I think that because we're both young, we can kind of afford to do that. We can afford to, to have short-term relationships and have fun. But like if you are at a point in your life where, you want to settle down and you just don't have time for those kind of short-term relationships, like I think that like it's fair to just like turn down someone because they're like, oh yeah, like you don't want to have kids like within the next 5 years, and like that's like we're just not compatible. I feel like that's justified if that is your goal in the end.
That makes, dude, imagine if we had like like a 40-year-old person on this podcast with us, like everything we're saying would be so heavily contrary to what they think. Like just our views on anything regarding relationships, I feel like would be like the opposite to them because we're in a very short-term mindset right now.
I feel like, a lot of people kind of look down on people that will like reject people just solely because they don't like kind of fit their goals, or like, for example, like, oh, if you're still in, I don't know, you can think like if you're still in student debt, or if like, you know, you're not ready to buy a house, you're not ready to settle down or get married. Like, I feel like people like almost get a bad rep for rejecting people just solely based off of those materialistic kind of reasons. But I feel like that's almost like justified. Like, if that were my goal, and like, for example, if I want to have kids and I wanted to like, if that were my goal and I want to be happy that way, I think that turning down a relationship because of that is like, even if people say, oh yeah, what if they're the one? But like, I don't care, right? Even if they're the one, like, even if they are the one, I wouldn't give up those goals just for them.
That's so interesting because that's like, your goals are now clashing with your soulmate, and we established earlier your soulmate is your destiny. So it's like your destiny is now clashing with your goals. And I guess you could consider in that case your goals are a way for you to create your own destiny, right? And to make your own path. And so like falling into the trap of just going with the soulmate could end up screwing you over. And I mean that brings up an interesting point too, with like the divorce rates in America, with like the divorce rates being nearly 50%.
Crazy.
What's even the point of getting married? Like, what if I told you can get married, but then like there's a 50% chance you will have to split all of your income, all of your house, like you have to split like the kids, and you have to deal with all of the trauma that comes from like splitting up with someone that you've been in love with for like 10 years. Like, would you do it? Like, I feel like only a crazy person would say yes to that.
That's like really crazy to think about. It's like a coin flip, like a chance that you will be happy in like a long-term marriage. I feel like personally I still would, but because I watched this video, I forgot it was on YouTube. It was called like Advice for Married People from Divorce Lawyers or something about that. They were just saying that like marriages, it's basically like a gamble, but like the prize is like so big that you are like, that most people are willing to go through with it. Like if you do end up being successful, like it's, you know, it's well worth kind of like all the hardships and stuff. So like most people are willing to take that gamble. And I feel like I'm someone who's willing to do that too. What about you?
No, I mean, I thought so beforehand, but I don't think so anymore. And again, obviously this is so influenced by the fact that like I haven't even graduated college yet. Like how am I supposed to make these decisions now? But and I'm sure my mind's going to change 100%. But right now, you're asking me this question right now, and I'm saying no. Like I would never get married because, like, one, there's a 50% chance that all of that ends up just going down the drain. And then two, it's like you have to think about like what do you even get out of a marriage? Like you get to have like the comfort of another person and eventually kids. But like the kids thing, if you really wanted kids, you could adopt kids. And the comfort of another person, like, is that really necessary? Like are we as humans programmed to need one other person? And what, like, where did that number one come from? Why is it not 0? Why is it not 2? Why is it not 3? Like, why don't I need 3 soulmates to be loved? Like, at the end of the day, like that sense of comfort comes from your own standards. So if you just set your standards to I don't need anyone versus I need 5 wives, like it depends on your standard.
I think that this is almost just like the difference between men and women. Like I feel like women are just programmed to like, this is like kind of like a stereotype, right? Like men like don't want to settle down and women want to settle down early. It's because I think women are just like biologically programmed to want like one person to nurture their kids, because like women like evolutionarily like they like they put a lot more care into their kids because they have to carry it for like 9 months and like they have to pick one person. But men like just from like a biological standpoint, they could just have multiple kids and they wouldn't really have to like shoulder that much burden unless they like chose to. And so, I feel like that's just kind of like one of like the gender differences. And that's really interesting that you would like think that way too. I think a lot of it is almost just biology. I think that men like naturally, like, yeah, you say like men settle down later in life too. I feel like it's normal for a woman to be younger in a relationship and for a man to be older. Like it's not like the other way around is kind of uncommon. I think a lot of it is because of like the differences between genders.
Yeah, that's very true. That is true. And like I don't know. Like do you even want like do you have an inherent wanting for kids? Like I don't even care. I don't even want children.
Well, I think I used to think that I didn't. I don't know. I feel like me personally, just like sitting here now, like no, I don't. But I kind of like it's kind of the idea of like you have a greater purpose, and I feel like I guess personally, like I don't, but like I do at the same time. Like I kind of like believe that you have
Yeah.
like I believe that at some point I will, you know, like even though right now I don't, but I kind of like I know that when I get into my 20s like and 30s and things, like I feel like I will, and it's kind of like fulfilling, yeah, like it's fulfilling like a greater purpose in life. It's like you're leaving something in the world that's going to be like there even when you're not.
So when I ask you like picture yourself in 30 years, like is one of the first images that comes to mind like you with like
Yeah,
a
exactly.
family?
That's like that's probably like my number one just goal in life is to have a family.
That's so interesting because that's not my goal. Like in fact, I feel like that would kind of
Really.
impede on my goals. Like, obviously, I'm not trying to say like career
Yeah,
over
yeah.
family or anything like that. Like that's not what I'm trying to say. But like to a certain extent, like that's why people don't start families when they're like 16, right? Like that's why teen pregnancies are viewed as bad because like obviously to a certain extent having kids and having a family takes up a lot of time that could be better spent on promoting yourself as a brand or promoting a company or like working on your
Exactly,
career.
yeah.
And so it's just interesting to me, like, when do I want to make that sacrifice? Because it's a sacrifice. It's definitely a sacrifice. But like, when do I want to make that sacrifice? And for what am I making that sacrifice? And if the reason for the sacrifice is just to like spread my genes forward, which I know it's a very like biological take on it, and there's a lot more benefits that come from starting a family than just like spreading your DNA. But like if that's the primary benefit, then honestly I don't see the worth of even making that sacrifice if there's no real gains
I feel
to
like
it.
my reasons for wanting children, it's not really it's almost religious. I feel like it's more spiritual, not religious, because I'm not like I'm more like agnostic, but like I feel like I have a more like it's almost like it's just like you have a purpose. Like I know that's why I make the distinction. Like right now, right now, if you were to like ask me just like personally, I wouldn't want kids, but I know that but I know like deep down that like I do, if that makes sense. Like on a surface level, I don't. Like I'm like, yeah, I want to, I want to have my own career, and I want to spend like I don't want to like think about like, how much money kids cost and like all the time and effort and like whatever, and then like the things that like does to your body, right? Like I don't want to like gain like 50 pounds holding a bunch of kids in my like body, but I feel like from a kind of just like a higher purpose kind of level, like I do have like almost like it sounds weird, but just like a calling or just like a like you feel like you're fulfilling a purpose by having a family.
That what you said about the deep down thing, actually I think I
Yeah.
do relate. Because I'm saying all this now, like I'm talking big bold words of no, I'm never gonna have a family, but like deep down I know that I'm also just spewing crap.
Yeah.
Like I know deep down I will definitely have kids like in the future. But I don't like obviously right now I'm telling you I don't want to, and rationally thinking
Yeah,
I
no,
don't want
that's
to.
exactly what I feel.
But
Yeah.
for some reason I just know that I will eventually
Yeah.
have to. Like even if it's me not wanting to, like I will
Yeah,
have to.
really that's like
Like why do we feel like I don't think I've ever felt such a clash between my internal, I guess it's like an innate sense of, what did you say, like
Yeah.
finding your calling, like it's an innate
Yeah.
calling to spread your genetics, like there's a clash between that and like my
Exactly.
rationality.
When I think of it from a rational perspective, it seems like the most irrational decision ever, right? Like the amount of money and just like the
Exactly.
years that you spend, and also like it's just like it's
The
crazy. But
sacrifice,
like
yeah.
yeah, like but yet people still keep having kids, and it's like like yeah,
Everyone,
we just like
almost
keep having
everyone.
kids,
Yeah.
and it's like I feel like it's so weird. Like every human kind of has that like calling to like to preserve their DNA and to pass that down to their offspring.
Well, every
Yeah.
animal, right? Like
Yeah.
everything, because that's why it exists, because it keeps getting passed down. I wonder if it's possible to suppress that inner calling. And I wonder how many other inner callings we have, because if I'm 100% sure this isn't the only thing that like we believe in internally that we don't agree with rationally. And so I'm just thinking, if we were to be able to suppress all of our inner like innate senses of
Yeah.
calling, what would we look like as humans?
Yeah, that's so crazy because like if you think of because like I mean if you were to make the argument that it's not an innate calling and you say like oh maybe just humans just like they want to have sex or whatever and like babies just happen to come out of that, but I feel like that's not because we have so much like technology
Not
or like
true.
birth control, like you could not have kids if you don't want kids, but people like like we have the ability to prevent you from having kids. Like you can enjoy all the pleasures of like a relationship and whatever without actually having to have kids, but people like keep doing it, and it's like it's so crazy. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Like that would be a good justification for like 200 years ago when there was no like condoms or anything. But like now it's like if there's condoms, then why
Yeah.
are people having kids? And it's because of that internal calling. Like what else, what other internal callings do we have that are just motivating us without us knowing? Because I feel like once you can identify what inner callings you have, then suppressing them is easier. And then by suppressing them, you can be focused more on the goals that you set rationally rather than the goals that you have instinctively.
So do you think like finding a partner is kind of like a calling? Like the truth is you don't need a partner in life. I mean like
Yeah. I mean, biologically, you want
Yeah.
multiple partners. At least
Yeah,
for
for men.
for like males, especially in the animal world. Like I'm talking
yeah.
purely evolutionarily. Like I think humans are one of the very few creatures that like stick with one person. But like evolutionarily, it's mainly just like the men just like have multiple different partners. And so, I mean, so do the women too, but like it's mainly the men that do that. So from an evolutionary standpoint, I guess that's the goal. But again, there's like I guess within humans, there's an internal calling to stick with one.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Like how did we like end up deciding that? I mean like yeah, from an evolutionary perspective, like kind of like polygamy is like probably the norm, right? But I guess
Yeah. I mean, at least in
Yeah.
the majority of cultures. I know there's a lot of cultures that don't
yeah,
agree
so I
with
think that like the idea that like all these societies that we've built somehow have all kind of shifted towards monogamy. Like, like every single culture that has kind of popped up, like with the exception of a few, but like every culture that has like existed on like Earth, at least from humans, is like we all operate under like this monogamy.
Yeah, and it's like why? Like because if the sole goal is to reproduce as
Yeah.
much as possible, which is like from an evolutionary standpoint, that is the goal for everyone, for
Yeah.
both men and
Yeah.
women. That's the goal. Then polygamy would be just best evolutionarily, because then you can have more kids with more people.
I think this
for
also brings
everyone.
up an interesting question. Is just like, should you? Because you were talking about earlier about suppressing your kind of like callings. Like, should you do that in favor of rational thought? Like, I feel like it's kind of interesting. Like, is rational kind of thinking or like rational reasoning when it comes to decision making your life, like is that the best way to be happy, or is it like following your calling? Like is that the best way for long-term happiness?
I think it goes along with the question of like whose needs are we fulfilling. Like I feel like your rationality is illogical considering the scope of the universe, because your rationality is based on your
Yeah.
individuality. But your calling is illogical in the scope of you as an individual because it doesn't benefit your personal goals. Right? Like it depends on the scope you're looking at. Like if I was to look at just my personal happiness, then I would follow what rationally I think I should do. But if I were to look at my happiness as a part of this collective universe, as a part of society built by like God, then like I would be fulfilling my need by going along with my calling, I think.
But I feel like there's also like the thing about having kids, like having kids does make people like very happy. Like it fulfills your personal needs as well, you know? Well, I
does
guess
it?
it depends, but like I would say for the majority of people, even though like having kids is like difficult, like they wouldn't like go back, you know? Like they wouldn't say like, oh, like it's like after, it's kind of like the delayed gratitude kind of thing. It's just delayed gratification. It's kind of just like yeah, like in the process it's hard, but I think very few parents would say like, oh, like I would have preferred a life without my kids.
Well, because they don't know what a life without their kids is like. Also,
Yeah, I guess that's true.
right. Like I feel like if you asked me about anything that I've done in my past, if you asked me would you go back and change it, I would always say no, because I don't know what it would have been like if I had changed it.
Yeah, I guess that's true, but I feel like there's kind of an inherent like benefit, or there's an inherent kind of happiness that we derive from like these kind of personal connections, like relationships and having children, that we just can't derive from like a materialistic kind of goal, like a job or like a salary or kind of like, you know, or a, you know, like a sort of career goal. Like I feel like there's inherently a sort of benefit that we can't get from that.
That's so interesting. Yeah, it's the whole concept of like money doesn't buy happiness, but like the people around you can make you happy. I wonder if it's possible to like substitute that with something, like especially with rampant technology.
You're making me think of like the sex
expanding.
robots.
Yeah, I mean that's already been substituted. Like I read something like about in Japan, like people just aren't even having
Well, I
sex
think I read
anymore.
that too, but I forgot what's the reason. Is it because
I think the reason was
robots?
just because
That's so
those like
funny.
those robots, and then there's like so much more technology and like massive amounts of porn, and like just like the young people don't know how to actually interact with the opposite gender
That's
anymore.
so funny. Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
But that's not a good shift. Like I'm talking about a good substitute, because obviously like that fulfills your physical needs, but that
Yeah,
doesn't
like
fulfill
for example,
your
like if you had like
emotional
a
needs.
robot like partner that just kind of like had a conversation with you and like cared for you and like whatever, like that kind of idea. Like I feel like that'd be really weird, but
That sounds absurd right now, but can't it fulfill all of your needs? Like what would be missing? Like what is there that a human has that a robot doesn't have in terms of relationships?
I mean, I feel like it could fulfill your need if you had never known anything else. Like I feel like if you like for us that we do interact with humans on a like day-to-day basis, like we would know the difference. But for example, if a kid who was born like only around like, you know, robots or whatever, like I feel like they like that would be able to fulfill their needs. Like because
That's interesting, but that still implies that there's a difference, that you'd be able to notice the difference.
yeah, like can technology, like I don't know, like you know more about technology, like can they actually like make it so that we can't tell a difference?
Oh yeah, 100%. Like in fact, I think in the next like 100 years there will be technology that's like so good that like we can't tell it. And just because and this is solely based off of like what's happened in the last 100 years. Like 100 years ago, you tell someone that we'll have computers in our
Yeah.
pockets that can call people from 100 miles away, they'll call you crazy. Same thing here. Like me telling like the audience that like I think that we'll have computers that replicate humans so well that we
Yeah.
won't need relationships. Like they'll call me crazy, but it's what's crazy is how fast technology is exponentiating.
I feel like it depends on like if you know. Like I feel like if like for example, if I had a robot like instead of a partner, like if I knew, then I feel like I would like I would say like, oh, it's different.
But
Like if I
why?
knew that like if someone told, for example, if I bought it off eBay or whatever, just like for example, like then I would know like oh, there's a difference. But like if you never told me, and like let's just say I kind of met this robot like the way I would meet a person, then I feel like it probably like wouldn't make a difference to me. Like if you knew the difference, but like
Yeah.
I feel like we kind of just have like I feel like we have a need like or we have like a kind of want to connect with other human beings, and if someone told us like, oh, that's not an actual human being, that would definitely kind of impact your view of that like person or robot, right? But if you didn't
Yeah.
know, I think it wouldn't.
I get exactly what you're saying. Like,
Yeah.
I totally understand what you're saying. In fact, like, I felt that way with, those video games online that, like, claim to be
Yeah,
you're playing
no,
against
exactly,
real
exactly.
people,
Yeah,
but then
yeah,
they're
yeah.
just robots. Like, it makes, once you find, like, I've Googled it, and I've Googled, like, is
Yeah,
this
yeah.
game really online? And it turns out you can turn your Wi-Fi off and still play it. And that, like, crushes you. Like, it's like, I don't
Yeah,
want to play the
exactly.
game anymore. It's not against real people. But my question is like, why? Like, what psychologically, what is there that is making you enjoy it more if it's a real person? Because either way, the game is behaving
Exactly.
the same way as a real person would. In fact, the fact that I had to look it up just shows that I can't
Exactly.
even tell the difference. So why am I upset that it's not a human if I'm getting the same things
No,
out
yeah,
of it?
exactly. I think that it's just like we have like a want or we have a calling for human connection, and like we want kind of like even if we can't tell, we want to know that it's authentic, you know? Like but I guess if we can't tell, then it's like yeah, like nothing fundamental actually changes. It's just like our conscious like awareness of it changes. It kind of goes back to like the blissful ignorance kind of question. It's like once you know, like nothing actually changes. Like you could easily go back to living your own life. But like people who people who like for example like in the Matrix, like they choose to kind of like they choose to know, and they choose to like change their life because they know. But you don't have to change anything you do just because you know.
Yeah. That's an
Yeah.
interesting thought. I think we should probably discuss like the matrix and the idea of like if you know that you're in a system, like would you want to even
Yeah.
change it on
Yeah.
another episode?
Okay, well we'll just end this one here. Thank you guys all so much for listening, and we'll see y'all next time.